Mercy Corps' stated mission is to alleviate poverty, suffering, and oppression around the world. But Mercy Corps' work is already being affected by the Trump administration's freezes and cuts to foreign aid. Mercy Corps operates in more than 40 countries, providing disaster assistance, wartime relief, and humanitarian aid. Mercy Corps has nearly 6,000 team members, most from the countries in which they work. Kate Phillipps-Barrasso is Vice President of Policy and Advocacy for Mercy Corps. She joins us from her offices in Washington, D.C. Thank you for being on Eye on Northwest Politics.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
First of all, let's talk about you're looking to sell your headquarters here in Portland, a building that's in Old Town. Why are you looking to do that, and does that sale have anything to do with federal cuts?
Well, thanks for asking this question. We are in fact selling that building, but we have been considering putting it on the market now for almost 5 years. And while the situation with the federal cuts has sort of forced that conversation and been a factor in it, it's something we had been planning prior to these developments. Just with COVID-19 and less people coming into the office on a daily basis, a building where we had about 300 people coming into work before the pandemic, winnowed down to something like 25 to 45 people coming in a day due to flex working schedules. So that's like a 12% occupancy rate. And it just didn't make sense to keep a building of that size, given how it was being underutilized, particularly given that we are trying to cut our global carbon footprint in half by 2030 across our offices and operations, and heating and cooling a building of this size just simply didn't align with that goal.
Will Mercy Corps still be based in Portland once that building is sold?
Absolutely. Mercy Corps remains a Pacific Northwest grown organization with deep roots in the region. Portland is our home, and we will have a sizable presence continue in the Portland area.
How have the federal freezes and cuts to foreign aid affected Mercy Corps?
Well, they've definitely affected Mercy Corps, but I'd point to the fact that they have had a dramatic global impact, really in every corner of the world. Because prior to these cuts, the U.S. was the single largest donor globally in combating poverty, in global health, and in humanitarian assistance, representing something like 35 to 40% of foreign aid flows. So having these dramatic terminations as a result of the foreign assistance review announced by President Trump has had a significant impact on operations across organizations across different countries, including Mercy Corps. And I'd underscore these could not come at a worse time. Humanitarian needs are at an all-time high. 305 million people worldwide are in need of life-saving assistance. So that growth in need now with intersecting with deep and drastic and precipitous cuts is likely to have a catastrophic impact. And Mercy Corps is already seeing across the world from a result of cuts made to our programs, real impacts. And we fear what these mean for the most vulnerable people around the world.
How many of your programs have been cut, and out of how many?
Right. About prior, at the beginning of this year, about 50% of our funding came through U.S. government grants. And we had something like 62 U.S. funded programs around the world. And as a result of the review and the subsequent mass terminations that occurred, 40 of those programs were ended literally overnight. And we estimate that something like 3.5 million people around the world would have been reached through these terminated programs through emergency food assistance, clean drinking water and sanitation services, and access to shelter. And they have really unfolded in every corner of the world. For us in the Central African Republic, Sudan, Gaza, Somalia, Afghanistan, Lebanon, the list goes on. And these are places where you will find some of the most vulnerable and poorest people in the world whose lives are affected by conflict and climate change, and places where lives literally hang in the balance. So we are deeply worried, but as a result of these developments, we are more committed than ever to finding ways to serve these vulnerable populations.
You talk about one of the things you do is to help provide clean water to parts of the world that need it. I want to play part of a video from one of your team members, Dane Curry, describing one of your projects supporting a community in Afghanistan.
For many years, the community here has been drawing water from an unprotected water source like this, where both children and animals are using the same water source. For the past year, Mercy Corps has been working on implementing a program that will provide clean drinking water to the community. But because of recent stop work orders from the U.S. government, this project is at risk of not finishing. This will have dire impacts on a community to have enough clean drinking water and the ability to support their families into the future.
And that's just one example of the work that you're doing that you can't do now because of what's happening on the federal level. We got about a minute or so left, and I just want to touch on this. You're operating in Ukraine, even as the bombing by Russia continues and President Trump trying to negotiate a peace deal there. What are you doing in Ukraine, and are you involved at all in the politics of that conflict?
Well, we've been operating in Ukraine since the beginning of this conflict, working with about 100 Ukrainian organizations and in neighboring countries where there's Ukrainian refugees. And we're really focused on conflict-affected farmers, making sure that people can continue their livelihoods and that there's adequate food going into the markets in these conflict-affected areas. We are also providing cash assistance to particularly vulnerable families, those displaced by the conflict, and art therapy for children, because this conflict has had a tremendous level of trauma in youth populations. We've reached about 1 million people since 2022 in Ukraine. And while we are not involved in any of the negotiations around the end of the conflict, but are very hopeful with this and with other conflicts to see it come to a close, because ultimately that is the most important solution for people whose lives have been upended by this fighting.
Kate Phillipps-Barrasso, thank you for joining Eye on Northwest Politics. And if our viewers want to help out Mercy Corps in their mission, you do have a website in which people can do that. Thank you for joining Eye on Northwest Politics.
Thank you, Ken.
Next, a plea for the Oregon legislature to approve a bill aimed at curbing gun violence. That's next in our Give Me a Minute commentary.